Welcome. We're dedicating this exploration to the life, the career, and the eventual self-imposed retirement of a figure who generated just this extraordinary public warmth.
All while keeping this profound personal privacy.
Exactly, Richard Simmons. His passing in July 2024 brought him right back into the global consciousness, and it reminded us of his incredible impact. So today, we're going to explore the sources that really define his journey.
Right. Our mission here is to carefully synthesize the facts, look at his highly recognizable public persona, trace his huge career achievements, and then really analyze that often painful decade of speculation that followed his complete withdrawal from public life.
It's a central paradox, isn't it?
It is. We're examining how a man who dedicated his entire professional life to encouraging joy and health and connection for millions of people
Eventually felt the need to retreat from that world entirely.
It becomes this critical study in the contrast between a relentless outward mission and the absolute necessity of personal privacy and well-being.
And that contrast, that core tension in his story is what's so compelling. He was the fitness guru, shouting motivation, wearing those shorts covered in thousands of sparkling Swarovski crystals.
Unforgettable.
And yet, he made a very conscious choice to disappear for 10 years. A retreat that just fueled rumors and a public curiosity that honestly often bordered on the absurd.
And put immense pressure on him.
So we need to respectfully unpack the factual timeline of his life and the precise facts that led to that decade of silence. This isn't about the rumors. It's about the verifiable story contained in the sources.
Absolutely.
So to really begin to understand the phenomenon that was Richard Simmons, we have to go back to the origins of the man. He was born Milton Teagle Simmons.
Right.
And we need to examine that intensely personal journey that really fueled his career. This vibrant, energetic character wasn't just an invention. It was a persona built from a very real place of struggle.
That's so true. The foundations are planted firmly in New Orleans, Louisiana. He was born there July 12, 1948.
And his upbringing in the French Quarter was certainly colorful.
Yes. The sources say he was raised by show business parents. His father was an MC who later worked in thrift stores, and his mother was described as a traveling fan dancer and a cosmetics saleswoman. He also had an older brother, Lenny.
And the name Richard, the name he became so famous for, that was adopted from an uncle, wasn't it?
It was. An uncle who provided significant support, even paying for his college tuition.
And speaking of college, his early pursuits were in the arts. He studied first at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette and then graduated from Florida State University with a BA in art.
And you can see these early signs of theatricality, even before the fitness career took hold. As a young art student, he actually appeared as a so-called freak show character.
2 Fellini films, of all things.
Yes, 2 highly acclaimed Federico Fellini films, Satyricon in 1968 and then The Clowns in 1970. It shows this very early connection to the unusual, the theatrical, and an acceptance of being viewed, outside the mainstream.
Even as he was grappling with these deeply personal health challenges.
Precisely.
And those challenges, they really defined his early life. The sources are very clear that his profound struggle with his own weight began in early childhood.
He said he recognized the negative perception around his size as early as age 5.
At age 5, it's just heartbreaking. By the time he was 15, he weighed 182 pounds, eventually peaking at 268 pounds.
And it's also a really poignant detail that before he committed to art and fitness, he practiced Catholicism. He converted during adolescence.
And even considered the priesthood for a time.
He did. That idea of serving and connecting with others, whether it was through faith or art or fitness, it was clearly central to his identity right from the start.
So it's the intensely personal nature of his own weight loss journey, losing 123 pounds himself, that becomes the absolute genesis of his entire career.
The whole philosophy.
Yeah.
In the 1970s, he moves to Los Angeles, works initially as a maître-d'hôtel, but his focus shifts dramatically to fitness, and it's driven by this critical realization he has about the fitness industry at the time.
And what was that realization? Because this is what makes his story so revolutionary, especially for the 1970s.
Well, he looked around and he observed that all the existing exercise studios, they catered primarily to the already fit, the sleek, the competitive.
They were intimidating places.
Deeply intimidating for people who were struggling with obesity, who felt shame, or were just trying to start a healthy life from scratch. It was a space designed for perfection, not for the process.
So he created the solution he himself desperately needed.
He did. He opened his own studio. Initially, it was called the Anatomy Asylum, which he later renamed Slimmons.
A much better name.
A much better name. And the core mission was deliberately non-competitive, non-judgmental. It was all about creating a uniquely supportive atmosphere, emphasizing healthy eating through proper portions, and most critically, making sure the exercise was enjoyable.
It wasn't just about training. It was about moving together and feeling accepted.
And that focus on nutrition was just foundational to the whole thing. His business initially included a salad bar restaurant right there with the gym. He playfully named it Roughage.
A pun on roughage.
A clear pun, yeah. And that name alone tells you everything about his holistic philosophy. It was never just exercise. It was always diet and enjoyable movement combined. Even after the restaurant closed, that ethos of supportive, non-competitive health remained the driving force behind Slimmons for decades.
It was a radical departure from the gyms of that era.
A complete departure. And from being this supportive local gym owner in Beverly Hills, Richard Simmons, well, he quickly transformed into a media giant.
An Emmy-winning television personality.
Yeah.
He just masterfully capitalized on the emerging media landscape of the 1980s.
His initial leap to nationwide visibility was so rapid. It was organic, too, largely thanks to the success and the word of mouth from his health club.
He got his first big break appearing on the show Real People.
Right. That's right. He would introduce customers he had personally helped achieve significant weight loss. That national exposure, plus his habit of teaching classes in shopping malls to reach everyday people, that really launched him into the spotlight.
And that visibility led almost immediately to scripted television. He got a recurring 4-year role playing himself on General Hospital.
And crucially, he then hosted his own highly successful program, The Richard Simmons Show. It aired from 1980 to 1984.
And it covered everything: health, fitness, cooking, motivation. And it wasn't just popular, it was critically acclaimed. It earned him multiple Emmy Awards.
But the truly global, the defining phenomenon had to be the sweat into the oldies empire.
Oh, absolutely. That video series just took off during the massive 1980s aerobics craze. But, unlike the Jane Fonda videos, which should feel a little intimidating.
His videos were inclusive. They featured everyday people, not models. You saw them struggling and succeeding and smiling. It became one of the decade's most popular fitness video lines.
And the scale of his influence is just staggering. The sources cite Simmons himself, stating that by 2010, over 35 years, he had helped humanity collectively lose approximately 12 million pounds.
That number, 12 million pounds, it's almost incomprehensible. It really speaks volumes about the power of his unique trademark persona.
He was famous for that energetic, loud, uniquely motivational demeanor. He never shouted at people to push harder. He cheered them on to love themselves more.
And of course, the visual signature was inseparable from the brand. Those iconic candy-striped dolphin shorts paired with tank tops decorated with shimmering Swarovski crystals.
That look was instantly recognizable worldwide, and that persona, it allowed him to transcend fitness and just infiltrate every corner of pop culture.
The list of his media appearances shows just how omnipresent he was. He was equally comfortable doing guest spots on improv shows like Whose Line Is It Anyway? Or self-parodying on Arrested Development.
He did voice work, too. Boone and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the movie, and the very memorable Coach Salmons in the Disney Channel series, Fish Hooks.
And if you look at the physical catalog of his work, the books, the videos, the audio programs, it just illustrates this relentless, almost obsessive creative output aimed at serving his audience.
We see best-selling books like Never Say Diet and Still Hungry after all these years.
And the visual media spans decades, evolving from the core Sweatin' to the Oldies series to highly specific videos like Sit Tight, which was designed specifically for the physically challenged and for seniors. He really worked to cover the entire spectrum of physical ability.
And yet, for all that pure joy he radiated, his relationship with late-night television, where that persona was often, mocked or used for cheap laughs, it could be deeply volatile.
He was a frequent guest on The Howard Stern Show and David Letterman's programs, but one incident with Letterman stands out as particularly revealing of the pressure he faced.
We're talking about that infamous moment on The Late Show in November 2000.
That's the one. Simmons appeared dressed as a turkey, totally committed to the bit, and he attempted a hug or a kiss with Letterman, seeking that typical warm comedic exchange.
But Letterman's reaction was aggressive and completely unexpected. He responded by spraying Simmons violently with a fire extinguisher.
And the sources confirmed this was not harmless fun. The blast from the extinguisher triggered a severe asthma attack for Simmons.
It's a moment where the court jester persona was exploited, and he was physically harmed in the process.
It was so damaging that Simmons refused to appear on the show for 6 long years.
And when he finally returned in November 2006, the dynamic was still so fraught. Simmons was demonstrating a food steamer with his name on it.
And Letterman intervened, insisting on placing this tray underneath it. When Simmons turned the steamer on, something in the tray exploded and caught fire.
It sent Simmons running off the stage in alarm.
Now, the sources do note that he ultimately took that second incident in fairly good nature, joking that he felt like Michael Jackson because of a previous pyrotechnics mishap.
But these episodes really highlight the painful tension in his public life. His profound openness and his willingness to be vulnerable and playful were just repeatedly met with pranks that sometimes crossed the line into causing actual distress.
It forces us to acknowledge the intense, often humiliating pressure he faced just to maintain his relevance in that media ecosystem.
And it's so vital we look beyond the workout tapes to the serious issues he engaged with. He successfully leveraged his platform to engage with complex political issues.
His mission went far beyond just selling videos. It was about systemic change.
His political activism was focused squarely on the health of the next generation, wasn't it?
Exactly. In 2008, he dedicated a significant amount of his time and visibility to supporting the Strengthening Physical Education Act of 2007. This was a piece of legislation aimed at amending the No Child Left Behind Act.
So for our listeners, what was that act really trying to achieve in public schools?
Well, it was trying to mandate and fund non-competitive physical education. And that's key because it directly mirrored his personal philosophy at Slimmons.
He wasn't advocating for competitive sports.
No, not at all. He was advocating for federally supported, mandatory, enjoyable, and inclusive movement for all children. He wanted to ensure physical education was treated as a core part of the curriculum. He was fighting for institutional support for the very kids who might be struggling with weight and self-esteem.
And yet, what is so deeply moving and complicated about his story is this stark contrast between his global fame as a motivator and the pervasive loneliness described in his personal life.
He was a worldwide icon who explicitly claimed to have few friends. He stated it very candidly, "I don't have a lot to offer to one person. I have a lot to offer to a lot of people."
That is perhaps the most profound insight into the paradox of his life.
It really is. It suggests the singular dedication to his public mission that was so absolute, it actively precluded deep one-on-one personal relationships.
The sources confirm he lived alone in Beverly Hills, accompanied only by his 6 Dalmatians and his 2 maids.
But the true measure of his dedication to the individual was his relentless fan interaction.
This detail is astonishing. Sources indicate that as late as 2008, well into his massive fame, he was personally answering all his fan mail, responding to emails, and incredibly, making hundreds of phone calls each week.
Just think about that operational commitment. Hundreds of calls a week to people who reached out for help.
He was the isolated motivator, dedicating himself to mass outreach on an intensely personal, one-by-one scale.
He was giving this deeply personal, encouraging attention to strangers while actively maintaining very few intimate connections in his own private life. It truly paints a picture of a man dedicated to a calling that required just a profound emotional output.
Now, we also have to address the few moments where the pressure of his public life just boiled over, resulting in controversy. In March 2004, he was cited for misdemeanor assault at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport.
That citation came after he physically slapped a man named Christopher Farney in the face. And the slap was explicitly in response to Farney loudly mocking Simmons' exercise videos.
So it wasn't a random act. It was a physical reaction to a very personal attack on his life's work.
Yes. The misdemeanor assault charge was later dismissed a few months later, after Simmons reached a private settlement with Farney. It just provides this rare, painful glimpse into the intensely personal impact that mockery had on him.
And on the opposite end of the emotional spectrum, another powerful example of his deep personal commitment was his response to Hurricane Katrina.
It absolutely devastated his hometown of New Orleans in 2005. He felt that disaster so deeply. In September 2005, right after the storm, he appeared on Entertainment Tonight to discuss the catastrophic effects it had on his family and his own active personal involvement in aiding those affected.
And he maintained that commitment, didn't he?
He did. He returned to New Orleans a year after the flooding and again in 2007, making appearances on programs like Your World with Neil Cavuto to raise awareness not just for recovery, but also for his Strengthening Physical Education Act. He connected his personal history and local roots directly to his national political advocacy.
Finally, we should address the topic of speculation about his sexual orientation, which the sources note followed him consistently throughout his career.
It often became another area of media curiosity and intrusion.
And he consistently chose not to publicly address the subject, fiercely maintaining his privacy around that part of his life.
He did. However, the sources noted detail that emerged following his death in 2024. Jane Fonda publicly stated that she had last seen him for lunch at the Polo Lounge, where he was accompanied by his new boyfriend.
That factual note provides context that Simmons himself had kept private for decades, reinforcing his right to manage his own narrative while he was alive.
Which brings us to the defining period that solidified his cultural mystery, his sudden and complete withdrawal from public life.
It began in 2014 and lasted until his death a decade later. And it's vital that we analyze this with profound sympathy, recognizing the genuine physical and psychological pressure he was under.
The sources confirm the specific date his withdrawal began, February 15, 2014. From a man who was constantly in motion, constantly teaching, constantly in the media.
The silence was immediate, absolute, and jarring. And of course, in the absence of facts, speculation just spiraled into these outlandish theories.
By March 2016, those public concerns had reached a fever pitch. Rumors, often pushed by tabloids, began circulating that he was being held hostage in his own home by his housekeeper.
This theory gained so much traction that he felt compelled to respond, even though he wanted privacy. On March 14, 2016, he did an audio interview on The Today Show.
Right, where he flatly denied the rumors and insisted he was fine, mentally sound, and simply making a conscious choice to be less visible.
But despite his public assurance, the lack of visibility continued. And in November 2016, his beloved gym, Slimmons, the literal foundation of his career, it closed down permanently.
With no public announcement or farewell from him.
And that silence only intensified the public's obsession, which really culminated in February 2017 with the launch of that highly popular and, I would say, controversial podcast, Missing Richard Simmons.
Which was specifically dedicated to investigating his disappearance from the public eye. The level of public anxiety was so high that law enforcement eventually had to intervene.
In March 2017, the LAPD conducted an official welfare check at his home,
responding to the persistent reports. And they subsequently issued a clear public statement confirming that Simmons was perfectly fine, mentally capable, and that he was simply doing what he wants to do, and it is his business.
Then, in April 2017, there was that brief flash of public contact after a hospitalization for severe indigestion. A message was posted on Facebook.
It said, "I'm not missing, just a little under the weather." But even that attempt at reassurance just created more confusion.
Because the photo they used with the message was identified as being from 2013, which raised legitimate questions about who was actually managing his social media accounts.
And the media frenzy wasn't just rumors, it became aggressive, leading to major legal action. In May 2017, Simmons sued the National Enquirer, Radar Online, and American Media, Inc. for libel.
The basis of the suit was their false claims that he was undergoing gender reassignment surgery.
And this legal battle resulted in a really widely discussed and significant ruling in September 2017, which Simmons ultimately lost.
The judge ruled that misidentification of certain immutable characteristics, like a person being transgender, is generally not actionable defamation unless the plaintiff can prove special damages.
Which means tangible financial harm. And this is a complex legal point. Essentially, the judge said that publishing a lie about his gender identity, while untrue and invasive, wasn't considered damaging enough in itself to meet the high standard of libel for a public figure.
So for Simmons, a man seeking to protect his privacy, this meant the press could publish these sensational claims without consequence, as long as it didn't cost him a specific endorsement deal, for instance.
It just profoundly highlighted the legal vulnerability he experienced as a public figure trying desperately to maintain basic boundaries.
And his fight for privacy went beyond the press. Between 2018 and 2020, he pursued legal action against a private investigator.
He claimed the investigator had placed a tracking device on his transportation vehicle, which led to a criminal complaint. And the court system upheld his right for that lawsuit to proceed, noting that such unauthorized tracking is a clear violation of California law.
Even in retirement, he was forced to spend years fighting in court just to maintain basic physical boundaries.
So when we turn away from the sensational rumors and look at the actual factual reasons for his retreat, as provided by those closest to him, the picture becomes far more sympathetic.
His longtime house manager, Teresa Reveles, who was often misidentified by the press as his controlling housekeeper, she offered clarity.
She cited two main, deeply personal reasons. First, he was suffering from failing knees that required surgery. This meant he was physically unable to perform his signature high-energy routines up to his own incredibly high standards.
He felt he couldn't, in good faith, continue teaching if he couldn't fully participate himself.
And secondly, she cited a deep nervousness about aging. He reportedly told her that he did not look that beautiful anymore.
And that just underscores the absolute perfectionism he applied to his public image. His commitment to the Richard Simmons persona was so intense that when he felt he could no longer physically embody it perfectly, he chose withdrawal.
But even in this self-imposed isolation, the sources confirm he continued his personal mission. He motivated fans by calling and emailing them privately. He traveled locally in disguises and continued donating to charities he supported.
He was still connected and still giving back, just no longer required to perform publicly.
But the public's insistence on seeing the performance continued right up to the end. You saw this with the controversy around the biopics. In January 2024, a movie starring Pauly Shore was announced.
The court jester.
Right. And Simmons quickly took to Facebook to explicitly disavow it, saying, "I have never given my permission for this movie." He was fighting to control his own narrative.
But then, just a few months later, in April 2024, he released a different statement indicating he was discussing giving his approval for a different biopic.
It's a subtle shift, but it suggests that towards the very end of his life, he was actively engaging with the possibility of shaping his own legacy and narrative. He wanted it done on his own terms.
Which brings our conversation to a close. Looking at his final months and the tragic circumstances of his passing, and noting the poignant efforts he made to reconnect just before he died.
The scrutiny was relentless, even in his final year. In March 2024, he felt he had to issue a statement on social media clarifying that he was not dying.
Just because he made a cryptic post encouraging people to embrace every day.
And it generated significant public alarm. It's a clear marker of how severely his decade-long absence amplified even minor social media activity into a national event.
In that same month, he chose to reveal a very personal health detail. He disclosed a past skin cancer diagnosis underneath his right eye,
which he noted had happened so many years ago. And crucially, he used that personal disclosure not for sympathy, but to encourage others to be vigilant, urging people to go to the doctor if they saw anything unusual.
That was classic Richard Simmons, the lifelong motivator, using his own vulnerable health history to actively help others.
Tragically, the circumstances of his death, which occurred on July 13th, 2024, just one day after his 76th birthday, are just profoundly moving.
And they underscore the difficulty he had accepting his medical limitations. The sources reveal the crucial detail. He suffered a fall in his bathroom 2 days before he passed away.
And crucially, he refused immediate medical attention.
He wanted to spend his 76th birthday at home. He resisted going to the hospital. He went to bed after the fall and was tragically found the next day by his house manager, Teresa Reveles.
While initial reports suggested natural causes, the LA County Coroner's Office later provided a definitive cause of death in August 2024.
They confirmed he died of complications from that fall, with underlying heart disease as a contributing factor.
And importantly, the investigation found absolutely no unprescribed drugs in his system, dispelling any potential rumors about his health at the time.
And what makes his death just particularly poignant is that despite a decade of intense privacy, he was actively planning a measured return to the public sphere right before he died.
Only 2 days prior, he conducted his first significant interview in years with People magazine. He showed his classic humor, joking about having a candle on a zucchini for his birthday as a vegetarian.
Though maybe allowing himself one Pepperidge Farm Milano cookie.
He was also actively organizing a much longer major comeback interview with Diane Sawyer.
So he was signaling his intent to fully tell his story on his own terms.
And beyond media, he was writing a Broadway musical about his life with the composer Patrick Leonard. These details paint a clear and heartbreaking picture of a man who was preparing to re-enter the public sphere. It makes his unexpected death all the more tragic.
And his legacy continues to be shaped by those closest to him. His brother revealed a final, fitting detail that Simmons was buried at Pierce Brothers Westwood Village Memorial Park, dressed in his trademark fitness outfit underneath his clothes.
A final nod to the persona that defined his mission. And finally, 1 week after his death, his team shared what was clearly his final prepared social media post, a gentle farewell that paraphrased the lyrics of Fly Me to the Moon.
A final, gentle moment of connection to the audience he had spent his entire life serving, even in his absence.
When you look at the full trajectory of his life, from the bullied, overweight kid who found salvation in movement, to this demanding, Emmy-winning icon, and finally to the private man who refused to perform when he couldn't meet his own high standards, his greatest lesson may have been demonstrating the fundamental right to choose privacy.
Even when the world felt absolutely entitled to his perpetual performance.
The sheer volume of his creative output, the books, the videos, it all demonstrates a relentless, decades-long effort to connect and help others, an effort that continued in private long after his physical presence vanished. He chose integrity over accessibility.
It truly makes you consider the relentless pressure fame puts on authenticity. We often celebrate public figures for their unwavering accessibility, assuming their existence is purely for our consumption. But what does Richard Simmons' decade-long retreat teach us about that tension between a demanding public mission and ensuring one's own complex need for privacy and well-being? It's a question worth mulling over long after the music stops.
Indeed.
Thank you for engaging with this examination of the sources.
Thanks for listening.